Welcome to the deep dive. We gather the research, you get the knowledge. Today, we're tackling something pretty fundamental: how people feel about justice.
Right. Justice isn't just some dusty law book concept. It's about perception. When people stop feeling treated fairly economically, legally, or maybe based on their identity, things can get shaky. Legitimacy, social cohesion, it all ties back to that feeling.
And today, our deep dive is focused, very focused. We're looking at the sense of social justice in Iran's Azerbaijan provinces, so East and West Azerbaijan, Ardabil, and Zanjan. And crucially, this isn't just one moment in time. We've got data from two big national surveys, one from 1379 and another from 1394. That's about a 15-year gap.
And that 15-year perspective is key. Also, the location matters. These provinces, historically, they've had their own narrative, often feeling a bit overlooked in terms of development resources, cultural support, compared to the center.
Okay.
So tracking feelings about justice there gives us a really sensitive reading, potentially on broader national dynamics.
Right. Before we dive into the findings, just one quick technical point for you listening, because it affects how we understand the numbers. The surveys used a 5-point scale.
Yeah, and importantly, people were rating how much they agreed with statements about injustice.
Ah, okay. So a high score, like a 4 or 5.
That means strong agreement. People are saying, yes, I see this injustice happening.
Got it. So a lower score, dropping towards 1.
That's actually a good sign in this study. It means people are agreeing less with a statement about injustice. So lower score equals better perception of justice.
Perfect. That makes sense. Lower is better. So we're looking at 3 main areas: general social justice, then judicial justice, and finally, ethnic justice. Let's start with that first one: social justice, fairness, merit, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So this first dimension, social justice, it's about, basic economic fairness and whether you can get ahead based on skill. The research highlights 2 key questions here.
The first one really gets at everyday fairness, or maybe unfairness. It asks about needing connection, specifically the idea that you lose your rights if you don't have money or patronage. The Persian term was kushin ana usin.
Money and connections, basically.
Exactly. Very practical.
And the numbers. What did they show over that 15-year period?
Well, there was an improvement. The average score went down from 4.07 in the first survey to 3.65 in the second one.
Okay, so down is good. People agreed less that you need connections. That sounds positive.
It is positive, directionally. But let's hold on that marginal improvement idea we mentioned earlier. Over 15 years, that change, well, statistically is quite small. The effect size was tiny, actually.
So it improved, but maybe not by much.
Precisely. It suggests things didn't get worse on this front, which is something. But it doesn't exactly scream major reform. It feels more like maybe some surface-level changes slightly ease the feeling that everything depends on who you know, but only slightly.
Okay. And what about the second indicator for social justice? This one was about meritocracy, right?
Yeah, this asked if people believed that, quote, ordinary people cannot reach high positions despite being experienced and specialized.
So can skill alone get you to the top?
That's the question. And here, too, we saw a small positive shift. The average score went from 3.17 down to 3.07.
Again, lower is better. So a slight increase in the belief that merit can lead to advancement.
Exactly. A subtle reduction in pessimism, perhaps. People might still see big hurdles, but maybe the feeling that it's completely hopeless for skilled people without connections eased off just a tiny bit.
Now, there was another interesting statistical point here about both of these social justice metrics, something about standard deviation. You mentioned opinions became more homogenous.
Yes, that's a really telling detail. So standard deviation, basically, it measures how spread out people's answers are.
Okay.
In the first survey, 1379, for both these questions, the answers were more scattered. You had some people strongly disagreeing, some strongly agreeing, lots in the middle, a wider range. High standard deviation. By the second survey, 1394, that spread narrowed. The standard deviation decreased. People's opinions were clustering more tightly together.
So more consensus.
More consensus, exactly. And importantly, that consensus formed around those slightly more positive average scores we just discussed. So not only did the average perception improve marginally, but people also became more uniform in that slightly less negative view. A shared, albeit only slightly less despairing, outlook on economic fairness and merit.
Interesting. Okay, let's move to the second area, judicial justice, because you said this is where things get contradictory.
Yeah, this is where the picture gets really fascinating and, frankly, a bit confusing. 2 different indicators about the justice system seem to point in opposite directions.
Okay, what's the first indicator?
Indicator 1 was about the big picture, the ideal. Is the law applied equally? Specifically, do people believe officials, the powerful people Idon and Chaki, are treated the same under the law as ordinary citizens?
Equality before the law, a cornerstone principle, and the finding.
Here, we see a really noticeable improvement, a statistically significant one. The score went up from 2.68 to 2.88. Now remember, lower is better overall, but this question is slightly different in interpretation. The shift itself indicates movement. The researchers noted this had a moderate effect size.
So people increasingly felt that, yes, the law does apply equally even to those in charge.
That seems to be the perception, a growing belief that, status doesn't buy immunity, maybe some high-profile cases or anti-corruption efforts were actually filtering down into public perception. It suggests people saw the structure of justice as becoming fairer at the top.
Okay, that sounds like a major win for legitimacy.
It does. But then you look at the second indicator.
Ah, here comes the contradiction.
Exactly. This one's about practical trust. It asked people how confident they were that if their own rights were violated, they could actually get justice by going through the legal system.
So can the system actually help me?
Precisely. And on this, basically no change. Stagnation. The average score barely moved. Just a tiny, insignificant dip from 3.22 to 3.19.
Wow. Okay. So let's piece this together. People feel more strongly that the law applies equally to everyone, including the powerful. But they feel no more confident that the legal system will actually work for them if they need it. How does that work?
It points to a huge gap, doesn't it? A gap between the perceived fairness of the rules and the perceived effectiveness of the process. People might believe, theoretically, that even a minister isn't above the law.
Right.
But when it comes to their own experience, maybe dealing with delays, costs, bureaucracy, perceived bias in local courts, their confidence just isn't there. They trust the abstract principle more, but not the practical delivery.
So faith in the structure, but not the function.
That's a great way to put it. They see improvements in the symbolic equality, maybe, but the grinding reality of navigating the system, that hasn't improved in their eyes.
Yeah.
And that disconnect is a serious issue.
Definitely seems like a vulnerability. Okay, that brings us to the third dimension, and you flagged this one as particularly worrying: ethnic justice.
Yes. If the judicial findings were a paradox, this one is unfortunately much clearer, and the trend is sharply negative.
What was the core question here?
It was very direct. It asked people if they believe the government treats all ethnic groups in the country with equal respect and value. This goes beyond just laws and money. It's about dignity and recognition.
And the data. You said it was a shock.
It really stands out. The average score increased significantly here. Remember, higher means more agreement with injustice, so this is bad news. It went from 3.4 euro in 1379 up to 3.00 1394. Wait, let me check that direction again. Apologies, the score declined from 3.4 to 3.00. My mistake on the direction earlier, the number went down, but this question's framing might be interpreted differently, or perhaps the text means disagreement increased. Let's reread the outline point. Declining sharply from an average of 3.4 in 1379 to 3.00 in 1394. Okay, a decline in score here still means a worsening situation based on the typical scale interpretation. Let me rephrase based on the source description that disagreement to opposition increased. The score dropped, meaning people moved away from agreement that things were equal to a stronger disagreement. So the feeling of equal treatment worsened.
Okay, so the score dropped from 3.4 to 3.0. On a 5-point scale, that feels like a substantial shift downwards, suggesting less agreement with the idea of equal treatment.
Exactly. It's a sharp deterioration. The source specifically notes this was the biggest change observed across all the dimensions, with a moderate effect size. Cohen's d equals 0.38. It's not subtle. It signals a growing feeling of inequality, of being less respected and valued among ethnic groups in these provinces over that 15-year span.
And we're talking about the Azerbaijan provinces specifically, places with distinct cultural and linguistic identities. What does this point to regarding government policies or focus during that time?
Well, it strongly suggests that whatever gains were perceived in, say, fighting petty corruption or making the idea of law seem more equal, they were completely overshadowed by a growing sense of ethnic or regional grievance. Policies related to cultural expression, language rights, regional investment, distribution of resources, the things that signal respect for identity were likely perceived very negatively. The source itself mentions that history of unequal development. This finding screams that those historical sensitivities weren't just lingering, they were actively worsening in the public's perception during this period.
So this feeling of ethnic injustice, it's not just about whether one region gets slightly fewer roads or factories.
Oh, it's much deeper than that. It's about dignity. It's about feeling seen, heard, and valued for who you are. When a group perceives that their language isn't supported, their culture isn't respected, or that opportunities consistently flow elsewhere, it creates a profound sense of injustice.
Right.
That feeling of disrespect, of being treated as less important, can easily outweigh marginal improvements in bureaucratic fairness. It hits at a core level of identity. And that's likely why this dimension showed such a dramatic negative trend compared to the others.
It's quite stark, isn't it? The aspects related to identity and respect declining so sharply, while the more, let's say, procedural aspects of justice showed only small improvements or stayed flat.
It really highlights where the pressure points were, or at least where they were perceived to be.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together for the listener. What's the main takeaway from this depth dive?
Well, if you look at that 15-year window in these specific Azerbaijan provinces, the picture of subjective justice is really complex, kind of fragmented.
Yeah, it seems like a mixed bag. We saw tiny, almost negligible improvements in feelings about general social fairness, like
Mm.
needing connections and a stronger belief that laws apply equally even to the powerful.
Right, some positive movement on the structural or abstract level.
But that was offset by stagnation in people's confidence that the legal system would actually work for them in practice.
The practical trust wasn't there.
And then the biggest finding really was this significant drop in the feeling of ethnic justice, a growing perception of unequal respect and value for different groups.
Exactly. And that's the crucial synthesis, I think. This data powerfully shows that you can tinker with institutions, maybe make courts seem fairer on paper or tackle some low-level corruption, but if significant parts of your population feel their fundamental identity, their culture, their region is disrespected or undervalued,
Yeah.
that can undermine everything else. Political legitimacy isn't just built on efficient bureaucracy or even theoretical legal equality. It needs that deeper foundation of perceived equal respect and value. And the data suggests that connection wasn't being made. Structural tweaks didn't translate into a feeling of genuine cultural or ethnic recognition.
So the feeling, the subjective part, is paramount, especially when it comes to identity.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've seen the sharpest decline was in this area of perceived ethnic justice, feeling treated with equal respect and value. The sources suggest this feeling isn't just about tangible things, but about psychological comparisons and recognition. So that leads us to a final thought for you to consider.
If building this sense of justice requires more than just economic fairness or formal laws, what concrete, maybe non-economic steps does a society need to take? What actions truly build that psychological environment where diverse groups feel genuinely respected and valued on par with others, shifting perceptions and creating real cohesion?